foreseeable future, it will always be there. The family oral history indicates that it may have been drawn by a slave, because some slaves were very artistic, and the census as late as 1840 records that there were slaves on the Horner farm. Now, just adjacent to this divider is the granary graffiti. And somebody was impressed by the fact that there was frost that year on September 6th, 1883. And they must have found that that early frost was so impressive that they wanted to make a permanent record of it, so they did. And it looks like it's the same color as is used in the fish photo. But that we call the granary graffiti. Then the rosette, just 2016, we found a number of rosettes in the Horner barn. Now, barn experts are not in a common agreement as to what the rosettes meant. Some are on the outside of the barn and very gaily decorated in bright colors. Ours are all on the inside, and others besides this. This is just the one that's most photographable. But a consensus of opinion is probably that the rosette was a sign of good luck and hope that the barn would serve a long and useful life. Now this brings us to the second part of the chain of title. We've already seen the first part, which traces it up to when the Horners bought the property in 1802. Now, in 1838, there was an estate settlement whereby the farm was divided equally into three parts among three brothers, 381 acres at this time. Now, early on, the one brother decided he wanted to sell his share of the property and move to West Virginia. So he did. And now the property is reduced to 288 acres after he sold his part off. Now, David W. Horner Sr. bought out his other brother's share of the property and became the sole owner. And then in 1888 was the next estate settlement, in which David W. Horner Jr. and his brother Theodore received the property by bequest, 288 acres. By this time, a full set of additional farm buildings had been built on the property across the road from the original buildings, so it was decided that Theodore Horner would occupy the part of the farm where the new buildings existed, and David W. Horner Jr. would stay on the home place where the original buildings were. Theodore Horner died in the early 1900s, and his share was sold out of the family. So it's gone out of the family, and now we're down to 137 acres, which was my father received by bequest in 1917, and the same 137 acres that I received and bequest from my father in 1959. In 1987, 85 years after it was eligible, the land became a century farm, 100 years in the ownership of the same family. And this is a certificate we received to show that we were a century farm. But 100 years after that, in 2002, the farm became a bicentennial farm by meeting three requirements. One, 200 or more years in the ownership of the same family. Two, still inhabited by a descendant of the original family. And three, still producing a certain amount of income from the sale of farm products. And this shows a certificate that we received at the time we became a bicentennial farm. This slide shows the sign which we were given to erect on our property, indicating that we were a bicentennial farm. My wife Mary and me are co-owners of the farm at this time. We had this displayed in the yard of our house, and this also has the historical name of our farm, which is Locust Grove Farm, because the buildings were originally built in a grove of locust trees. Now, one of the ways that the farm still generates farm income for the sale of farm products is by the cows. Now, the beef cows. This is one of our 7 grandsons, Adam, surveying the Horner herd. But these are not Horner cows. These cows belong to the Waybright family, which rents the farm. They just happen to live in the Horner barn, and we're very pleased and proud to have them. In 1986, the Homestead house was recognized in historic Gettysburg, Adams County's house restoration program as being acceptably restored according to an investigating committee. The committee came out and they oohed and awed, and then later notified us that we were eligible to receive award number 16 of their historic house program. In 2007, the farmstead was entered upon the National Register of Historic Places, being cited for a, quote, property which embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, possesses high artistic values, represents a significant and distinguishable entity whose components lack individual distinction. This is a plaque which we received at the time, which we have displayed on the outside of our house, indicating that we are part of the National Register. And this is one of our local politicos, State Representative Don Mao, who is presenting my wife and me with a citation from the Pennsylvania House of Representatives indicating that we have become enrolled in the National Register. Now, also in 2007, an agreement was negotiated between the owners of the Horner Farm, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the Adams County Agricultural Land Preservation Program to the extent that the owners agreed to comply with the conservation practices, the implementation schedules as written and agreed upon prior to settlement on the easements as indicated in the conservation plan identified as track number 260. In short, the land can never be developed for commercial purposes, but must remain in perpetuity in some sort of endeavor related to agriculture. In 2008, the Horner Barn became number 2 in historic Gettysburg, Adams County's Registry of Historic Barns. It is featured in their 6-page brochure, which is still in print and widely distributed throughout the county. And this is a certificate from Kurt Musselman, who is the one who instigated the barn preservation program, thanking us for our participation in that program. Also in 2008, application was made to and approval granted from the U.S. Geological Survey to name a stream running through the property the Bush-Horner Branch, in memory of a man who lived along its banks for all but 8 of his 75 years, J. Bush Horner. In 2015, the Horner Barn became part of the Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful program, in which agreement was reached to collect trash and litter deposited along roads bordering on the farm property. Now there is a township road running down through the property in which we collect the litter and trash on both sides of the road. And then along the north side of the Horner property, there is a state-maintained road, and we pick up the litter and trash on the south side of that road as well. Now, one thing that we are not required to do is to be a part of the Keep Pennsylvania program is that we mow the shoulders along this township road that I mentioned and the south side of the state road. Now, the state and the township are responsible for mowing it several times during the year, but sometimes it grows out and becomes unsightly, so we just incorporated it into a part of our mowing program and mow it along with our other mowing that we do. Now, if we did not do that, there would be times in which his shoulder would look more like this hayfield over here. In 2016, the Horner Farm received special recognition at the Pennsylvania Farm Show as part of the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture's acknowledgement of century farms, which were on the National Register. Now, this is a display they made at the farm show that year, and over top of my head here you can see the eastern elevation of the Horner barn. To the left of that you can see this a sign that we've already seen, the bicentennial farm sign reproduced. And then immediately below that is a southern elevation of the summer kitchen, which we mentioned, taken out through the post of the back porch of our house. Now, the owners of the Horner Farm take their environmental responsibilities very seriously. Anything that is recyclable, such as plastic, glass, steel cans, aluminum, magazines, newspapers, advertising circulars, cardboard, and so forth, is collected, sorted out, and periodically trucked to the Adams Rescue Mission for recycling. Now, we're very proud of this program because of the great work that the Adams Rescue Mission does in our area, and one of their main sources of income is derived from recycling. Combustibles go up in smoke in a burn barrel. All sewage goes into a septic tank and field where it is processed on site, never reaching any stream. All garbage is spread on a field where it becomes fertilizer, enriching the soil. Somewhat typical of the groups who come for a tour of the Horner Farm is that of a Corvette club. 7 beautifully restored Corvettes whose owners came with their wives and sweethearts for a tour of the Horner property in 2016. Now, these next 4 images do not have anything to do necessarily with the historicity of the Horner Farm, but they are interesting photos which I thought you might enjoy seeing. The silo photos, beginning with the upper left corner and going clockwise. When my father changed from hogs to hay to dairy cattle in 1930, he needed a silo to store food for his cattle for the winter months. So a silo was built right in the same spot where I told you earlier the stone wall had fallen down. A silo was built. Now, by the year 2000, the farmers who rent the land were no longer using the silo. So we elected to take it down as it was not part of the original barn. So this shows the next day, after April the 15th, removing cement blocks from the bottom of the silo to weaken it. And what this photo doesn't show very well is a rope which is attached to the silo and attached to a tractor out in the field out here. And by keeping the slack up on the rope, we could coax the silo to fall the way we wanted it to fall out into the field and not over against the barn. This photo shows it on the part way on its way down, and then this shows it on the ground. Now, I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the print, American Gothic, which was rendered by Grant Wood and which hangs in the walls of the Chicago Art Museum. This is American Gothic in its original form. But down on the Horner farm, we have the Horner version of American Gothic, which looks like this. My wife and I with a dung fork. But not wishing to end our presentation on such a dour note, we also have the American Gothic Horner style in the happy version. So this concludes our presentation of the facts and information having to do with the historic Horner Farm.